So I'm Lena and I work for ActionAid, and I come from a very different background, I think, to many of you, because I do not come from a development background at all. I come from a campaigning background. So I've cut my teeth in campaigning for women's rights way back, and in my native Sweden, and also for Greenpeace for many years, and I've been active in ActionAid for a few years. So I was going to give you a bit of a sense of what ActionAid is, what we do on climate change, and through that demonstrate some of the challenges that comes with climate change. So ActionAid, it's a international, non-governmental organization. It's been around since the early 70s. A lot of the big organizations, Oxfam, Greenpeace, ActionAid, have been around since the early 70s, so it was a good time then. And it's active in about 40 or more countries. Where ActionAid is different from many organizations is that our base is in the global south, in Africa, Southeast Asia, the Americas. We do have offices in Europe and in countries like Australia, but it's relatively new. The organization did start in the UK, but apart from that, it's taken a while to get offices happening in other European countries. So we're quite different there, which I think is a strength for us. We're very political. We're not a charity. We start to call ourselves a social change organization. Aid and development has been traditional, but we're increasingly about supporting communities in their political battle, because in recognition that in the end they need to change their own situation, they need to challenge their governments and community leaders, they need to hold them accountable. And basically that's where we come in, to support people to do that. Obviously do some emergency assistance and so on and so forth as well, because people obviously need the basics in order to be active. But increasingly we're about working with people to help them ensure their rights. Not ties with political or religious organizations, which is also a little bit unusual in the sector. So climate change, that was my topic. So for us it's climate justice. So that's what we call it in ActionAid. And basically it's a very basic reason. Climate change is caused by countries such as Australia, the rich countries. It's the poor countries that will feel the impact the worst and probably first. That's the reason why climate change is a big issue for an organization such as ActionAid. And basically, for us, the work we have done in the past has had a lot to do with food security. And obviously climate change is going to impact on people's ability to grow their crops. It's going to change the climate forever in some areas, so that the crops that traditionally could be grown in those areas no longer can be grown in those areas. It will impact on people's connections to their traditional land. If we talk about Australia, for example, and our indigenous communities, some characteristics of those countries that people come from will change. Water sources might change, location and so on, which will have huge impacts on those populations. We also have, and I mean food prices there, rising food prices, which is, it was a big rise in 2008. It's increasing again. This is partly due to climatic conditions. It's partly due to policies from countries who want to address climate change. And to take a very concrete example there, in Europe, there is now a policy that 10% of fuels needs to be replaced, petrol needs to be replaced with biofuels. Now Europe doesn't have a lot of space to grow biofuels on, so they've gone to Africa to basically buy up land to grow biofuels to stick in the tanks in Europe. Now this land is generally coming from communities that have worked that land in the past. It could also be forests and stuff that are cut down, but in any case, it's land that's been traditionally used for food production mostly. So you see the chain of events that we in the rich countries try to address the climate change problem. We think it's a great thing to increase the amount of biofuels, and it all sounds good until you then look at where the biofuels come from and who's going to pay the price again, and ultimately it's often local communities that get shifted off their land, put into someone else's land, and they no longer have the ability to look after their communities. So these are the reasons why climate change is a topic for us. So what we're doing, holding the North to account, I never know what terminology to use. I saw in a previous presentation, high-income countries is probably the term I should use, but you know what I mean. In this case, Australia is in the North, amongst the rich countries. So basically, we are trying to, along with many other organizations working on climate change, are of course demanding that rich countries cut their carbon emissions, put a price on carbon, and also allocate funds to support those countries that we feel the impacts the hardest. But where our strength is really to work alongside communities, to help them see how they can impact on this quite big problem. And as an example, we worked in Kenya recently with a local community to defend their land, which was under risk from an Italian company who wanted to come in and remove the community and plant biofuels. So we then worked with this local community, and at this stage it's 1-0 to the community. It's not finished, but the land is still there, they're on their land, and it's been challenged. And the latest information we have is that our colleagues in Europe that are working on trying to adjust this legislation in Europe, the Europeans, EU Parliament and so forth, they are getting cold feet because they're starting to understand now the impacts of down the line. So the debate in Parliament has been delayed and so on, all of which we think are good signs. But that's how we work. We're trying to connect those, and we're trying to link the what's happening in this case Kenya with what's happening in Europe in that case. And finally, I just thought I'd give you a story, another story of connection, which I thought spoke to what you do a little bit. A lot of people come to us and want to work with ActionAid and do internships and stuff. And, we're a small organization, relatively speaking, and have relatively few opportunities. But this year, and this is another way of kind of getting out in the world and see what's happening. We launched something we call the Hunger Busting Blogger Competition. And this was an initiative to basically be able to start to speak about women farmers or women in Australia that has a connection with land, about the realities of their sisters in countries like Uganda and Kenya. Because the women typically are in charge of growing the food. They're typically, as was discussed earlier, less empowered to take decisions or have ownership and so on. So we're trying to create links between the, basically we try to increase the understanding in Australia about those situations and what needs to change in order to support those women in changing their reality. So we launched this Hunger Busting Blogger Competition. We got lots of applicants of women in Australia who wanted to join the competition. The prize was to go to Tanzania for a blogger training. So they didn't have to be bloggers to start with. They did need to know about Australia, agriculture, food, all that bit. Then they were offered the opportunity that was part of the prize to be a volunteer blogger for ActionAid for a year. So we had lots of applications, and here is one of our 2 winners, and her name is Tina, and she owns a fairly sizable organic farm up in Bundaberg in Queensland, strawberry and passion fruit, I think. And she is a mother of 4, I believe, and a successful businesswoman. She decided to do this, to put something back into the community. She won was one of the 2 winners, and this is where she is visiting in Uganda, a woman, Polly, who is a small-scale farmer in Uganda, and actually recently was in Australia to talk to the communities here about that. So Tina, and that's actually Hannah, the other winner, and she is a city farmer based in Melbourne. She does a lot of permaculture and stuff, so she has a quite different network. So they both went to visit Polly. They were looking at different projects in Uganda. They now come back and they're going to start to blog for us, and the purpose is that they will tell the story, become the voice of these women that they met in Australia, because Australia has a very big responsibility both to do the right thing in policies such as climate change and so forth, but also of course to be a good international citizen and support the right kind of work in those countries. So that was one example of how we facilitated for people who probably otherwise would never have gone out to rural Uganda and see what life is like there and stay in Polly's very simple house. And as an aside, a story, I was told by Tina that she was standing one morning and she was going to have a shower, and it was kind of slightly a little bit semi-private. They'd put a corrugated iron sheet up, and there was some arrangement with the shower, and she was standing there. She felt a bit exposed, and then one of Polly's 11 children, a young kid, came up and she said, we all look the same. So anyways, that was and this, I believe, is probably from the blogger training as well. So that was just a taste of what one could have an opportunity to experience. Thank you.